So today we are presenting on global learning opportunities for undocumented students. There are a variety of people here today to help me with this presentation, so I'm very appreciative of their collaboration. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So of course, we want you all to know what are we actually going to be talking about today. So of course, starting with some introductions and then looking at the past and present state of travel. Obviously, policies, are forever changing, and we want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information. So we'll be talking about advanced parole requirements for international travel, as well as looking for some requirements for domestic travel. We'll also be talking about the different global learning program opportunities available to you all, how to fund this kind of experience. And then we're really honored to have a special guest today who was a UC student, undocumented student who was able to study abroad in France. So you have a team of support here, and we're really happy and excited to be providing this information session because it's really important to kind of just know all of the different implications when considering a global learning experience. So first, starting who we are, I've been talking a lot, so I guess I should introduce myself. So my name is Ashley Bayman. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm a global learning coordinator and advisor with UCSC Global Learning. We were formerly called UCSC Study Abroad, but then we realized that using the term study abroad is really not inclusive of all of the different opportunities that exist. So yes, study abroad is one kind of program opportunity where you study internationally, but we have a variety of domestic programs as well as virtual programs even. So we really wanted to be inclusive in our office's name. When I was in college, I started off at community college, and there I was able to study abroad in Mexico for my first time, and that was my first time ever getting on an airplane when I flew to Mexico for the study abroad experience. And then when I got into college, I studied one summer in Brazil and then a semester in Argentina. So, global learning has completely changed my life. I was a low income, first generation transfer student of color. I started college later. I think I was 24 when I got to the university. So there were a variety of barriers that presented themselves. And I think what we all want to do is help debunk some myths about, global learning programs and help you work through whatever challenges might exist to be able to participate in this kind of opportunity. Next, I'll allow Araceli. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Araceli Aceves Lozano. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm the Undocumented Student Services Academic Counselor at UC Santa Cruz within the EOP office. And this topic is really important to me. I was undocumented as an undergraduate student prior to DACA being accessible. I graduated in 2011, and study abroad was something that I just categorically said or thought of as not something I could do, right? And now with DACA, advanced parole, and domestic opportunities that are really being highlighted and expanded, it's really exciting to see that undocumented students can take advantage of these opportunities. So really excited to be here with you all. And I'll pass it off to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Dominic, and I am the Legal Fellow for UC Santa Cruz with the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center. We provide immigration legal services to all of the UC campuses, to students and their families. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about advanced parole and what that looks like and sort of how it works. I heard from a lot of students who maybe don't know where we are with advanced parole, and I'm just so glad to be able to share this information and try to make study abroad accessible for anyone who wants the opportunity, because they're really wonderful opportunities. So thanks so much for welcoming to this space.
Thank you, Sarah. And next, we're going to allow our panelist to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm here to just share a little bit about my personal story in terms of traveling abroad when I participated at the University of Bordeaux in France in 2016.
So first, before we get into kind of the meat and bones of this, considering like why participate in the session, kind of looking at what you'll get away from today's experience. So some of you may or may not know that advanced parole for educational purposes was reinstated under the Biden presidency. It had been rescinded during the Trump administration. And so today, Sarah will be going over, kind of everything you need to know if you were considering applying for advanced parole. We also want to outline travel policies that impact undocumented students and provide some guidance. We'll be looking at international policies, in terms of travel, but also like looking at domestic, because as Araceli mentioned, we are expanding our domestic program opportunities. And we want to make sure that you really kind of understand, if you wanted to do something domestically, some implications that come with that. We also want to showcase some resources available to you all as undocumented students, as well as highlight the different program opportunities, kind of an exciting part of it. And then, of course, offer insight into the undocumented student experience through Oscar's story. So that's a little bit of what you can expect. But, before talking about any of this, the elephant that's always in the room, it seems like will forever be in the room, is COVID-19, right? Looking at COVID-19 and study away. So actually, we've had to cancel all of our programs starting in spring of 2020, when everything kind of reverted to online activities. And this fall is the first time that we've actually offered in-person programming, and all of our programs are expected to be in person for winter and spring and even next year. Of course, still pending, if there's any outbreaks or, obviously monitoring risk and safety is always going to be the most important deciding factor in terms of when and how we're able to offer programs. But we just want you to all know that we all continue to monitor the situation closely. And yeah, it's just something, COVID-19 is just something that we live with today. But your health and safety is always our top priority. So now looking at past and present state of travel for undocumented students, I'm going to kind of let Sarah take it away here.
Okay, thanks so much, Ashley. So before I get started, I just want to give a quick sort of pre-information thing. So I want to talk about the difference between legal information and legal advice. So what I'll be talking to or providing you with today is legal information, which is basically just general information that applies kind of widely, and it's just about what the policy is or what the laws are. And I just want to make clear that legal advice, on the other hand, is sort of how that information applies to a specific person. And so everyone has, their own sort of personal and immigration history, which might mean that this information applies differently. And so that's why we like to remind everyone that, I'm here as a resource. And if you'd like to know more about how your personal situation is impacted by this information, please speak with me. And it's always important to speak with either me or an immigration attorney or another immigration attorney, just to know more information. So I just wanted to sort of make that clear. Just because there's a general legal information doesn't mean that either you definitely can use a program or you definitely can't use a program. So I just wanted to sort of lay that groundwork first. Okay, so basically starting with what advanced parole was in the past. So from 2012 to 2017, basically before the Trump administration stopped approving advanced parole applications, individuals with DACA were able to study abroad if they received advanced parole and they were admissible. So admissibility is a term in immigration law, which basically means that there's nothing in a person's immigration history or personal history that bars them from being able to re-enter the US. And so even though, during this time, advanced parole was not, it's not a guarantee, and it's still not a guarantee, which I'll talk about in a minute. Many or dozens of UC students were able to study abroad and return safely. Next slide, please. So where are we now? As Ashley mentioned, the Biden administration reinstated advanced parole. Unfortunately, as many of you may know, over the summer, a court in Texas ruled that the DACA program is unlawful. This is, still kind of, this case is still kind of ongoing, but basically after this ruling, USCIS will continue to process DACA renewals, but it's not processing DACA initial applications. So basically they'll hold on to them, but they won't approve them or deny them for the time being. So this is also why it's really important to make sure that you renew your DACA on time, because if it's expired for more than a year, then it will be considered an initial application, and for now you won't be able to renew it. But this also means that USCIS is processing advanced parole applications. So right now, currently, you can apply for advanced parole with DACA if you're otherwise eligible. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is advanced parole? Advanced parole is permission granted by the Department of Homeland Security, allowing certain non-citizens to temporarily travel outside of the US and return lawfully. And DACA recipients generally can qualify for advanced parole, and also individuals with other forms of immigration relief, such as TPS, UNT visa recipients, and folks who are in the process of adjusting status, so applying for green cards. In this presentation, I'll be focusing on DACA-based advanced parole. So if you think that you may fall into one of these other categories, just keep in mind that the requirements are different. So the process might be slightly different. And as I said before, feel free to get in touch with me to try to see maybe how this process would look like for you. Next slide, please. So who qualifies for DACA advanced parole? For a DACA recipient to qualify, the purpose of the trip must be educational, employment related, or humanitarian. So educational trips would be study abroad programs, for example, which is why study abroad is a great option for advanced parole. The trip could also be for employment purposes, so like a conference or some kind of overseas work assignment, or the trip could be humanitarian. So this would be to visit an ailing relative, like a grandparent, to attend a funeral, or to seek medical treatment. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what the process looks like to apply for advanced parole. So the first step would be to fill out the USCIS form, which is called the I-131. If you're filling this out on your own, we recommend reading the instructions really carefully. As with all immigration forms, it's very detailed, so just to make sure that everything's done correctly. Then you'll write a 2 to 3 page statement of purpose, which will basically explain the details of the trip and how it supports your education. So you would talk about, what is the program that you're applying to? How does it fit in with your educational goals and maybe your major or the classes that you're taking or what you'd like to do in the future? So this is basically just to talk more about, like, why do you want to take this trip? Why do you want to participate in this program? And how is it going to help you in the long term? The next thing that you'll do is you'll gather evidence and documentation showing the educational reasons for traveling. So this would include a letter from your educational institution confirming that you're going to be participating in the program, proof of enrollment at Santa Cruz, other information from the program like the syllabus, the itinerary, other explanations of what the program is, an acceptance letter, or letters from your professors who are either in the program or professors that you've taken classes with. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but because of the timeline for advanced parole, sometimes there can be a challenge with if you need to apply but you haven't been accepted into a program yet, and if that's the case for you, then we can talk about maybe some of what your other options are for this evidence instead of an acceptance letter. Next slide, please. You'll also need a valid passport from your country of citizenship. Something to keep in mind is that the passport needs to be, of course, valid for the entire trip, but also for 6 months after the trip ends. So one of the first steps that you should take if you're interested in study abroad is to make sure that you don't need to renew your passport, and just make sure that it won't expire sort of right when you get back or during your trip. You'll also need a valid DACA grant. Similarly, your DACA needs to be valid for the entire period of travel. You'll also want to make sure, maybe think about like, when will you next need to renew your DACA? Right now, USCIS is not requiring, or generally doesn't require, biometrics appointments because they're using previous fingerprints, but it's possible that they'll require a biometrics appointment. And because that needs to be done in the US, it can be challenging to renew your DACA while you're abroad. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you will need to renew before you leave, or kind of just keeping track of what the whole timeline is. So with your application, you'll submit your most recent approval notice and the front and back of your work permit card. Two other things that you'll need are passport style photos that will have your A number or your USCIS number written on the back with your name. And then a $575 filing fee payable to the Department of Homeland Security. And I think that Araceli will speak a little bit later about what EOP can do to help with the filing fee. Next slide, please. Okay, so some other sort of information to keep in mind about DACA advanced parole while you're applying. So as many of you know, everything in immigration is very slow, and advanced parole is not an exception. So right now, the processing times are approximately 7 to 9 months, which is longer than it's been in the past. And, this kind of depends on this. Like, sometimes it might be more, sometimes it might be less, but it's really hard to know. So this is another reason why it's really important to plan pretty far in advance if you want to study abroad, to start thinking about like, when does the program start? What do you need to do before the program? And emergency advanced parole does exist, and in some cases it's possible to expedite the process, but generally it won't be available for study abroad programs unless there's some other kind of extenuating circumstance. The other thing to remember is that, or to know about advanced parole, is that when you apply, you specify the dates that you'll be traveling. So, you'll say from March 2nd, 2023 to, whatever exact day. So we recommend that you add at least 5 days on either end of your trip, just to make sure that if there's any travel delays or any unforeseen circumstance, that you will still be able to use that advanced parole document when you travel. And then the last thing to know is that, unfortunately, once you travel on advanced parole, you can't travel to another country that's not included on your document. And so, I think it's pretty common, like when folks study abroad, to, for example, if you're studying abroad in Europe, to take a trip to another country in Europe. Unfortunately, if you have advanced parole, you can only go to countries that are listed on your advanced parole document. So if you'd like to travel while you're studying abroad, you'll have to include that in your application, and it will have to be sort of part of your educational justification. So like with other parts of the process, if this is something you're interested in, we can also talk about this and figure out ways to include that on your application. Next slide, please. Okay. So I mentioned this before, but there are some risks with advanced parole. There are also some really important benefits. So what are the risks? I mentioned this a little bit before, briefly, but advanced parole does not guarantee reentry. When someone with advanced parole arrives, back at the US border, likely at an airport, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, or Customs and Border Patrol, they have the discretion to decide whether to allow the person to enter and whether they are admissible. So, if there's nothing in your immigration and personal history that would create a problem here, it's not like DHS is going to just kind of randomly not let someone re-enter. With that being said, there are some situations that might put a student at higher risk. Some of these examples would be if you have a prior deportation or removal order or a case in immigration court, if you've had any criminal convictions, if you've had a prior departure from the US and then returned without permission to re-enter, or if you've provided any incorrect information to immigration. And, you know, if you think that you might fall into one of these categories, it's really important to speak to an immigration attorney, to me or someone else, before you leave. And this is why in general, it's really important that before you leave the US, even if you have advanced parole, that you speak with an immigration attorney, because USCIS is the agency, well, USCIS is the one who processes advanced parole applications. CBP, which is like kind of another sub-agency within the Department of Homeland Security, they have the discretion to decide whether someone's admissible. So just because you have advanced parole doesn't mean that you will definitely be allowed back into the US. As I said, you know, if you don't have anything in your history that would, you know, create a higher risk, most likely is that it will be okay. But again, please speak to an immigration attorney before you leave the US. With that being said, there are also a lot of really amazing benefits of advanced parole. The first one is obviously that it could allow you to study abroad and to have educational opportunities abroad. The other benefit is that if you travel on advanced parole and you return, then you obtain what's called a lawful entry to the US. And a lawful entry is required to adjust status to lawful permanent residence. So if you have another, like let's say that you want to apply for a family-based petition, but when you first entered the US, you did not enter with a visa. If you study abroad on advanced parole and you return, it makes it that much easier to apply for a green card because now you have a lawful entry, which is one of the requirements. So that's a really important benefit for advanced parole. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the current status of domestic travel? So domestic study away programs might be a good option for undocumented students, whether you have DACA or not. One word about Real IDs is that they will be required starting in May of 2023. And they'll be required to board a domestic flight. If you have DACA and you can apply with your social security number, and your Real ID will be valid while your DACA is valid. So you'll just have to renew it every 2 years. If you don't have DACA, unfortunately, you won't be able to apply for a Real ID, and that will create an additional barrier for traveling domestically. But again, like this is something that we can talk about and sort of see what your options are. And this is going to be in 2023 starting. So there's still a little bit of time before this goes into effect. Especially if you don't have DACA, if you're an undocumented student without DACA, domestic travel can create some immigration risks depending on your situation. And this is because public transportation can sometimes be like a location where immigration officials carry out enforcement, especially if you're within 100 miles of a border. So this is why we recommend that you schedule a legal consult before traveling domestically, just to discuss whether there's anything in your immigration history that could place you at a higher risk when it comes to like having contact with immigration officials. And even in general, it's good to know sort of, first of all, that regardless of what your immigration status is, you have rights, and it's really important to know what those rights are so that if you ever do come into contact with immigration officials, like while you're traveling or even within California, you know what those are and you know sort of what to do in those kinds of situations. So like with everything else, please come and speak with me or with an immigration attorney, and we can sort of talk through how this applies to your situation. Next slide, please. So that's kind of it for my information about advanced parole. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I wanted to give a quick kind of shout out to UC Immigrant Legal Services Center, which is just to say that we work with UC students and also immediate family members. And so if you have a parent, sibling, spouse, or child who you think would also benefit from a consultation or working with us, please feel free to reach out, and my email address is on the slide. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Also, maybe Araceli might be able to put in the chat the website to UCSC Undocumented Student Services. Obviously, any support that either USS or Global Learning can provide, we will. We also have a page on our Global Learning website specifically for undocumented students with more information about advanced parole and our program types and the documentation required for different program types and just a lot more information. So as I mentioned, I will definitely send these slides to you all so you can have all of the links included on the different presentation slides. So now we're going to jump into actually looking at what type of programs we offer through UCSC Global Learning. We offer both international and domestic programs as well as virtual programs. We really want you all to know kind of what opportunities exist. So first, looking at international programs. For any international program, you would have to have advanced parole in order to re-enter the US lawfully. But if you apply to advanced parole and it's approved, then, obviously a lot of international doors can open. And some specific opportunities that we have are UCSC Global Seminars. Now, these are programs taught during summer session. They're led by UCSC faculty in an international location. We're hoping to onboard domestic locations within the next few years. But as of right now, we do not have any. I put a couple examples of the different programs we're offering for this summer 2022. But I want to state that on our website, if you go to globallearning.ucsc.edu and go to our programs tab, you can find all of the different global seminars that are being offered this summer. Usually the courses offered during the global seminars are already articulated for the major. So for example, Muslim Granada and its legacy is a literature course that you would learn. In Italian culture through food and language on the Amalfi Coast, there is a course that meets a CCGE requirement as well as Italian 1. So the courses really do range, but they're really great opportunities to study abroad for a short period of time and develop relationships with UCSC faculty, which can be really beneficial if you ever need like a recommendation letter or something like that. Our other program type for international opportunities are exchange programs. Now, these are also in person, and again, you would need advanced parole, but we have a variety of partnerships with institutions abroad. And through these partnerships, they send students to UCSC and we send our students to their campus. And the really great thing about exchanges is that you're just paying your UCSC tuition. So there's no additional cost outside of, the living expenses that you would pay there. And some of us, maybe all of us being in Santa Cruz know how expensive it is, like for housing and things like that in Santa Cruz. So sometimes you can even save money by participating in an exchange program. For both of these programs, financial aid completely goes with all students. It's UC credit. So it's kind of very integrated academically. Some other program opportunities that are both international and domestic is first UCEAP, which is short for the UC Education Abroad program. Now, all of their programs are international, and what it is, it's a system-wide program provider, meaning that students from all of the UCs can participate in these programs. Our panelist today, I think, also participated in a UCEAP program, and he can tell you a little bit more about what that experience was like. But the great thing about UCEAP is that they really have so many programs to choose from. You could do an immersion program where you're taking classes with locals in the local language. You could do a study center program where you're actually at a UC study center learning along UC students. They have programs that take place in multiple cities like Paris and London. They have language and culture programs. So if you want to go and learn a specific language, you could go on a language and culture program. They have internships and research programs and major specific programs. Just so many different opportunities exist. With UC EAP, because it is a UC program, you do get UC credit. All of your grades transfer back and automatically are applied to your transcript. Financial aid goes with you. So it is a really great option in terms of the variety of programs that they offer. Now, these programs are offered during all terms. So there's summer programs, quarter programs, semester programs, and year programs. So really a little bit of something for everyone. And then you could study abroad with other UCs. For example, UC Davis has a very long list of different types of programs, and their Education in Hawaii program has actually been very popular amongst our students and specifically amongst our undocumented student population. For these programs, they're kind of like our global seminars where you'd be abroad or away with UC faculty members on a program. It's usually like a smaller cohort of students. And these take place during the summer, similar to as our global seminars. And again, I really love the fact that there's both international and domestic opportunities. We did this presentation a few years ago and we had a student talk about their experience studying in New York City. They studied sociology there. And, she described having culture shock being in New York City. It's culturally, there are so many different places in the US that are very distinct. So I think it's a really cool opportunity to kind of see more of the US because obviously we're in California and there's so much more out there. Now, for any international program with another UC, you would need advanced parole. But if you do a domestic program, there's really no special documentation required outside of what you currently use as a UC student. And then I want to talk about some domestic opportunities. So actually the UC provides a vast array of different experiential learning opportunities available to all UC students. The program that I actually do advise for is the UC-DC Washington program. The program takes place in Washington, DC, which again is very culturally different than California or Santa Cruz rather. So you would live in Washington, DC, and you would do a professional internship with an organization based in DC while taking academic coursework at the UC Washington Center. Now, this program is offered during fall, winter, spring quarters. And in terms of documentation for the program, you do need a government issued ID, and some internships may require employment authorization documents provided through DACA and or social security number, but it really just depends on the organization that you'd be working with. UC Center Sacramento is very similar to UCDC, except that it takes place in Sacramento. And the focus is a little bit more targeted and focuses on public policy. But they offer programs in the summer, fall, winter, spring, and the documentation required for the UC Center Sacramento is the same as UCDC. And then finally, there's California Ecology and Conservation. I actually have been learning a little bit more about this program, and it's a really cool opportunity if you have any interest in kind of like environmental studies or sustainability studies or EEB. You travel to different reserves around California and you conduct independent research and field work. Now, this program is offered during the spring, summer, or fall, and there's no special documentation needed outside of what you currently use as a UC student. So again, these are all domestic opportunities that you can all take advantage of. And then finally, the last program I wanted to share with you is our virtual global internships. Now, this is a virtual program that takes place during summer session. It's for 8 weeks long. And the opportunity really allows you to work with a professional organization that is based outside of the US. So let's say, you have Chinese language skills or Spanish language skills and want to kind of work professionally using that language, you absolutely can through this program. You can see here what some of the organization's locations are around the world. These are the only locations that we currently offer for you to work with an organization. And then there's a variety of different industries that you can see here on the slide. Again, I said languages available include, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Portuguese, English, if you just want to do it in English, and a variety of others. And for this program, you actually take 8 units. So you take an intercultural communication course, which is worth 5 units, and then you take 2 additional courses. Because you're taking 8 units, financial aid completely applies to this program. It's a program that we run through our office, so we would support you throughout the whole kind of journey. So it's a really great virtual opportunity if you want to get some international experience and professional experience, from kind of the comfort of your home. And now we're going to just quickly look at, ways to actually fund Study Away, because I know finances always is kind of like the top barrier in students' minds, but we do want to let you all know that funding opportunities exist. So when we're looking at like study abroad and away budgets, as I mentioned earlier, programs can be less than what you pay here as a current UCSC student, or they can be more, obviously. Generally, budgets include things like your tuition and program fees. If you're going on a UC program, you're paying UC tuition, you're still a UC student. It includes your housing and meals, transportation, health insurance. It really does try to be inclusive of everything that you would need while participating in the program. Things that budgets usually don't include are, like personal travel or souvenirs and entertainment and things like that. So for example, if you are, in, I don't know, let's say you're in the UC-DC Washington program in Washington, DC, and you want to go to New York City, which is 5 hours or 4 hours north. The budget would not include the cost to go to New York City for the weekend, but it does try to be inclusive, of all of the other expenses you might have. And now looking at financial aid, as I mentioned, on any UC program, your UC financial aid tip generally goes with you. So you can receive, you can take your Pell Grant, any institutional or university grants, and sometimes there even might be special funding available for undocumented students. So I highly suggest you speak with a financial aid advisor to kind of talk through this. Generally, our financial aid office will provide an estimate of how much aid you can receive for your study abroad or away program. So it's a really great idea to meet with financial aid to discuss your financial options. Your CA Dream Loan goes with you if you receive that. And again, just being in touch with financial aid so you really can understand the price implications of whatever program you're looking at. Maybe you're deciding between 2 programs and you receive more aid for 1 program. It's really important to kind of like make sure you have those lines of communication open to understand any, financial implications. And then scholarships. There are a variety of scholarships available to undocumented students, and I listed some specific opportunities here. But Araceli, I'm going to invite you to kind of talk about financial support that USS can provide.
Thank you, Ashley. So through Undocumented Student Services, we provide funding through a program called Undocumented Student Services Emergency Funding Program. This is typically for unplanned financial hardship, and it also includes an opportunity for students that are renewing their DACA application to receive funding towards the application renewal fee, so the fee owed to the government. And similarly, we can also cover the cost for the advanced parole filing fee. Things that would not be covered by that type of funding would be the cost of the program for study abroad or other related fees for the program, but the filing fee owed to the government for those specific application processes like DACA and advanced parole is something that you can request, and I encourage you to do so. And to do that, all you would need to do is schedule an academic advising appointment with the first available EOP counselor. So all EOP counselors can help assess these costs for students. So you don't need to meet specifically with me, you can, but don't let my availability be a barrier to get an appointment on the calendar. And part of the conversation is just making sure that you understand all of your financial aid resources. So we typically go over an EOP budget grid as a component of that conversation. And then I'll hand it back off to Ashley for the other components, unless you wanted me to address those.
Oh, no, it's fine. So I just did want to mention that for most students, it is rare that scholarships can cover all costs. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is rare. But of course, as you're considering global learning programs, I strongly encourage you to meet with me or any other global learning advisors so we can kind of, assess the scholarship opportunities that are applicable to you. So without further ado, I feel like you got to kind of learn all the practical information, but now we're excited to invite to share a little bit about his experience studying abroad in France as an undocumented student. And there's some questions listed here that he's welcome to address. If you just want, the creative freedom to share what you'd like, please feel free to. I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Thank you, Ashley, and thanks so much for organizing this. So hi, everybody. For those that came in a little later, I was able to participate at, I went to school in UC Santa Barbara, and I also was a transfer student coming from Sacramento. And when I first arrived to Santa Barbara, I never really thought that studying abroad was something I would do. But I think halfway through my first year, I was intrigued at the opportunity, and of course, knowing my situation today, I'm still undocumented. I knew that it would take a different course, and I was definitely familiar with those types of hoops that we have to kind of jump through, just because with applying for DACA, every so often you kind of are familiar with that process. But I think I just wanted to choose the program because I really felt like going abroad would benefit my learning experience and also just in general life experience. I think that both those things combined really do play a huge role in what you do after you come back from studying abroad. So I also just wanted to travel as well. I'm originally from Guatemala, so I came to Sacramento when I was 9, and then I always felt like I wanted to leave the US and go study abroad, but I just never knew how to do it. My sisters, I have 2 older sisters, and one of them went to Sacramento State and the other one did go to school here. So I don't have any experience with, relatives or family members or like friends that had done this before I did. So it was very scary. It was very, I didn't know what to do. Again, I was studying in Santa Barbara and my family was here in Sacramento. So I just didn't really have any type of support. And at the same time, I think when I was in school in 2015, and so DACA had come out in like 2012, I believe. So, I feel like during those few years, I still was very shy and I didn't really tell too many people about my personal experience or where I was. So I think going to the UC EAP office was very nerve-wracking. I was very nervous to just even come out and tell these individuals that like, hey, I'm studying abroad and I really would like to do it, but here's where I am. And throughout the years, I've learned that this is something that to this day, I have to continue to practice and do at work and so on with other individuals. Just yesterday, I was at the farmer's market and, they were passing out some information about like, would you like to vote? And I'm like, oh, sorry, I can't vote right now. Because it's just a reminder that like, this is where you are. And regardless of your situation, you can make things like this happen. So I just really wanted to do it and I just found a way to do it. So to fund the program, I took advantage of working through work study. I qualified for a few jobs when I was in Santa Barbara, and I would do those jobs, during the summer and when I could in the fall, just to save some money. And it was relatively cheaper to go abroad than stay in Santa Barbara. I stayed with the host family and I stayed to the window of 180 days, and I made sure to get 180 days. I remember finals were over in like December 15th or something, and my parents came and picked me up, and then I was on a plane like December 16th because I really wanted to make like those 180 days count. So I just wanted to just leave and just get the full experience. And so I stayed for 6 months, and school didn't start until January, and then it ended sometime in June or so. But the process was really, I would say, easy, just because I felt like there was a lot of support from UCSB in terms of undocumented students. I worked with Habiba Simji, who currently now works as a managing attorney at UCLA. And I'm so thankful for her, because I would have weekly check-ins with her about the process, where I was, what I needed to fill out, and sort of what to expect. And to this day, even applying for DACA, I look for services like Siren or Siren in San Jose to just make sure my advanced parole or even DACA was on track, because it's a lot of work, and for so long my parents were my lawyers, but now with all these services available, I feel like I feel confident in doing those things. So funding was more or less taken care of through my personal savings, the work that I did with study at UCSB, and also the funding that I got through the university. And I didn't really feel like it was a challenge. I think also something to keep in mind is your banking situation, when you go abroad, how you are going to be taking money in and out of your account is a little challenging depending on what bank you have. So also making sure that you talk to a banker or wherever you bank, how you're able to pay for things abroad and things like that. So some of the primary challenges, like I mentioned, was definitely sharing my experience and telling those individuals that I needed help for applying for this. But luckily there were tons of resources, and I think the more I was open about what I was looking for, the more resources I was able to receive. And overall, the experience once I was abroad, I think if I were to go back and do it again, I think I would tell more of my friends. Like you see the pictures of these people that I still talk to this day. I think that's also something very meaningful, is that the people that I met at this study abroad program, I still talk to, and we still hang out. And I think it's a lifelong type of friendship that you create, because everybody's there not sure what to do and how to get through these days. But I think you have a lot of in common as well. But I think if I could go back, I would tell my host family, I would tell the advisors that were at those universities, I would tell maybe like one or two friends about my situation, because you never know what kind of trouble you might get into, or, you just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And for some reason, someone needs to help you, So I think letting some people know what to do in case something were to happen, right? Luckily, nothing like that happened, but I think that would be a good idea. And I took advantage of traveling. I went to over like 5 or 6 countries, and I was studying in France. So going through other European countries, I didn't have to have my passport stamped. So it was okay. I felt like it was okay. Of course, I was very nervous because I was told that like, you're only going to France, and when you apply in advanced parole, you only list, university and where you're going to be living, your address and things like that. But since I usually would take like trains most often, or if I did travel by plane, I would just make sure that they didn't stamp my passport, just because I knew that wasn't part of the educational abroad program. But everything was really, really well taken care of. I didn't run into any problems when I was abroad. The only thing coming back to the US, I was very nervous, just because I knew that I was going to expect some sort of, delay in getting into the international airport here in San Francisco. So as soon as I got off the plane and I went through, I don't know, it's not customs, but just like when you go back in, I got taken to a different room. And at that point, I was like, my heart was beating. I was very nervous because I wasn't expecting to be taken to another room, just because the person that sort of checks your paperwork didn't really know what the advanced parole stamp was for. So they told me to go to another room, and I waited for about like 30 or 40 minutes. And, 2 gentlemen came, they took my passport, and they went to a room and they talked about it. And then they came back and they were like, okay, you're good to go. So that felt really good just because I really felt like something bad was going to happen. And I was ready to just like cry or run away. I don't know. But other than that, it was really easy, I think. And something that you want to keep in mind as well is that when you apply for DACA again, you have to tell them that you were on advanced parole, and you have to list like what days you left the country and for how long, because they want to see that you technically left the country, even though you did it, through this application. They still want to know that you technically left the country. So just keeping track of that documentation as you apply again for DACA. And then other than that, yeah, it was lots of fun. I don't necessarily practice the French here at work, but I think I just went because I wanted to do something different. And I look forward to going back to Europe someday, once we're kind of allowed to do some of these things again. But overall, it was a really successful experience. If anybody has any specific questions about things that I didn't answer, please let me know, and happy to share. I hope that was helpful. And yeah, let me know how I can answer any other questions.
I do want to open up the floor to you all if you have any questions. We're all here to kind of support you all through, any inquiries that you might have. So yeah, so the floor is yours.
When besides like what actually happened to you, were there any feelings of like anxiety on your way back, and like feelings of like, is this gonna work or is this not, and how did you deal with those?
Yeah, I definitely was super nervous just because you're doing something that nobody else is doing in the program, and at times it's very normal to just get very upset or angry that you even have to apply for this. And just in general, the title advanced parole just sounds so like criminalizing, so I think overall, I try to focus on the positive and just say, like, if I did nothing wrong, I have nothing to fear. And once I come back to the US, I know that I did what I was supposed to do, and I'm coming back proving that I have nothing against me, right? So definitely getting on the plane back was sad because you're leaving and everything, but you are sort of like entering this gate of like, oh, are they gonna let me in, or what's gonna happen? I'm not gonna lie, part of me just wanted to stay in France and just like not come back. But I figured that's not the right thing to do. So no, I think it's definitely normal to get nervous. Again, I would, if you are thinking about doing a program, like find a buddy that maybe you could fly back with just to kind of keep you company, or let your advisors know, or maybe like have somebody that is documented, maybe meet you in whatever country you're studying abroad, and then they can fly back with you. So that way you kind of have a little friend. But other than that, again, like if you have nothing to fear, like you shouldn't really be as afraid to do it. And I think part of doing the program too is just like letting the government know that we're here and we also deserve these experiences. And by taking advantage of advanced parole, it shows that there are a lot of people that are doing these things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why did you choose France, University of Bordeaux, or like how did you choose to study in that location? And could you share like a memorable experience during your time in France?
So I went to community college, not really wanting to go to school because again, I was undocumented, and looking around in high school, everybody was getting so excited to apply for universities, and I just knew that I wouldn't qualify for any of those things. So going to school wasn't something I was super thrilled about, but I was studying French in high school, and I figured, well, I'll just stick to French, and I really liked it in community college. And then once I was applying for universities, I was like, oh wow, I have all my credits. I get to, you can transfer. And I just ended up going with the University of Santa Barbara because I really wanted to live by the ocean. So I picked the program because, especially Bordeaux, I'm not really a big fan of touristy places. And especially living somewhere for 6 months, I didn't really want that experience to be in Paris, where constantly I feel like there would be a lot of tourists. And Bordeaux just seemed kind of like a really historical city. It has a lot of great places. You're still pretty close to the ocean, and To be honest, the French are the French, right? But Spain was really close. So I could always go to Spain and speak Spanish and just be more comfortable with with the people around me. And for those at the university, they might want to close their ears, but I actually did some hitchhiking as well. And of course, I don't recommend that just because of, a lot of things could go wrong. But again, I just kind of wanted to experience it all with, because I knew that it was only once in a lifetime experience. After you're outside of school, you might not have this opportunity to study abroad again. But yeah, I just chose it just because I wanted to live somewhere that was more historical and like smaller and less touristy. And one memorable experience, I would definitely say like hitchhiking was one of the best things that I experienced. Like the first night I like slept outside because I couldn't find a ride to go anywhere. And the next day I ended up finding a ride to like Barcelona and Madrid and things like that. And of course the host family that I stayed with, it was a really nice French family and I lived with them for 6 months. So also just the culture of, where I come from and what their values are and sort of meeting halfway was just a really neat experience that I don't think it's not like when you're 30 or something or 40, you're just going to live with the host family. So I think it's something that you can only do when you are in school.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions for us? I know we're approaching 1 o'clock, so I want to be mindful of time, but definitely want to open the door in case there's any last minute questions you have for any of us here. And if not, I will definitely be sending a recording of this session. I will send the presentation slides and I will send all of our contact information. So as questions come up, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us so that we might be able to provide whatever support you need. I just want to say a huge thank you for, sharing this space with us, for telling your story. You're inspiring, you're an inspiration. You show that, you're kind of like forging paths, right? Like I'm here and I'm doing this because I deserve it, as all of you do. So thank you so much for sharing your story, being here with us today.